Okay, this is my Hictop 3DP12 setup, and I'm going to talk about some of the modifications that I've made to it. First off, you can see I have a magnetic print surface here. So this is quite nice for good adhesion for the parts. I print primarily in ABS, and this magnetic bed seems to handle the heat of ABS with a 90-degree bed, which is fine, and things seem to adhere very well to it. The other thing that I have added onto this printer is an infrared differential height sensor. This replaces the typical height sensor, which I can get in the mirror here, which is this SN04 height sensor. It's going to have trouble focusing. There we go. So that's the old height sensor that's still on there. I did replace the drive mechanism for the filament, and you can see the yellow part there in between the fan and the heatsink is actually the mount for the infrared differential sensor. And you will also notice custom messages on the display as well. There are some key things in here, such as you can save and recall settings. Where am I? Control, it's in that one. So store settings, and that lets you adjust the Z offset and store it so that it retains it between power offs. That's a key issue for bed leveling. I used to print on the Hictop using capped on tape, which worked quite well for the longest time. Actually, I started off with the painter's tape on there, and that was good, but it didn't give you a very good finish on the bottom of the part. So I switched to capped on tape. It took me a while to figure out that the easiest way to apply that is with a wet soapy solution on the surface of the print bed, on the aluminum surface there. Then the capped on tape can be applied and leveled down, and after it dries out, sticks like a maniac, and at least it lets you use narrow capped on tape and put multiple strips side by side to get it on the print bed and get the whole print bed covered. Then I switched to printing on glass, and the cheapest source of glass I actually found, which was quite convenient. I used to go over to my local dollar store. The source of glass that I used to use was these document frames from Dollarama here in Canada. I'm sure Dollar Tree and other places in the States have these things. For the Hictop printer, they are nearly the perfect size for the printer. They are a little bit long, which was fine. And I used a couple of clips at the back to hold it, and a couple of clips at the front to hold it. And I used the Elmer's glue, the color changing glue on the print bed to work. And what I would do was, because the original SN04 height sensor doesn't work far enough away to go through the glass, I would take the glass off and let it do its bed leveling, and I modified Cura to add a pause code in after the bed leveling in the printer start G code. So it would add an M117 pause, and then I would put the glass in, wait for it to come up to temperature, and then resume the printing in Cura. I would do the bed leveling at temperature just to make sure everything had heated, cooled, contracted, expanded, whatever, so that it was up to operating temperature before I did the bed leveling. So then I would put the glass on when the bed was hot, and this worked quite well, gave me a good finish, but I didn't like to have to wait after I put the glass on before I started printing. And the glass actually multiple times would break, especially trying to get some of the parts on. Sometimes the adhesion was too good. Usually if I was patient, let it cool off, the parts would just fall off of the glass, but occasionally the glass would shatter on its own or do something weird and break, crack and chip from all the thermal expansion. So I got tired of that, so that's when I went to the magnetic print surface. And I got this small one on here. I have a larger one on order that'll cover the full print bed. I just bought the smaller, cheaper one on eBay to try out. I made sure I got one that was ABS compatible for the high temperature, because I use like a 90-degree bed temperature for printing on ABS. And so now I've got one on order that's 310 by 310, which should be big enough to cover the whole surface. I'll probably have to trim it off on the sides. And that way I have a full bed print surface back. And I'll go through some more firmware updates to set the print bed size back to normal and get the probing out to the limits of the bed. This little guy here was an interim stop gap measure that I had before I got my infrared height sensor. And I used to actually use that. Let's see if I can show this on the bottom of the print head there. Yeah. So I would put that on the bottom here, and when it was doing height sensing on something like a glass surface or this magnetic base, it would come down and it would press the aluminum up and trip the height sensor there, because that needs a metal material. And that actually turned out to be quite repeatable, and it worked quite well. The only thing is, after it did the bed leveling for each print, it had to do a pause so that you could take that off. So that wasn't a big deal. I just had it pause, and then I would stick that to the front and carry on and resume with my printing. So there are three ways to wire the infrared sensor in on the printer. The infrared sensor comes with a 3-wire Berg connector, but the printer actually uses something different at the controller end, and the printer also has a little junction up near the print head which uses a 3-pin locking style connector. So you could buy a set of these on eBay, which is like a 200-piece set. I'm sure you can find a 3-pin one if you want, but it's only $5. Or the other option is to replace the connector at the other end of the wire from the sensor that plugs directly onto the controller board itself, and that uses these JST XH connectors, and you need a 3-pin for the motherboard or for the controller board as well. When I was going through the code to set it up for my Hictop printer, I actually, everywhere I made a change in the config.h, I put my initials or some sort of a marker so that I could find it later. And so then when I click on find, it brings me down to the section of code that I did. And usually what I did was, if there was a line there, for example the baud rate, I usually indicated what was changed. So this used to be commented out, in other words it was disabled, and the speed was 250,000, and I uncommented it and changed it to 115/200, which is a very typical baud rate for USB communication. And I can find the next, and it just finds the next place that I made a change. And so this is what you're going to do every time you go through and make the changes in the code. Make sure you put a comment in. And be prepared when you do the upload, which is a compile and upload using that. If it needs compiling, it'll recompile and then it'll upload. It automatically saves all of these files that you have made changes to. So any changes you've made to config.h get saved right then and there. I should also add that all of the modifications that I made to the config.h file in the Marlin 1.1.9 for my Hictop 3DP12 are listed down in the description down below, assuming that YouTube lets me put as long a description as I would like in there. I'm not sure about that on YouTube. We'll see. So, I have the Marlin 1.1.9 firmware, and in the Marlin folder you will see marlin.ino, and that will launch the Arduino IDE. When that does, you can expand that to a full screen window like I have, and you see the Marlin INO, but there are a number of tabs, and the key one that you're going to modify is configuration.h, and that's where all the changes that you need are in this config file. Once you are done making all the changes to the config file, under Tools, go to Boards, and choose the Arduino Mega or Mega 2560. Under Processor, make sure it says Mega or Mega, oops, I got on boards again. Under Processor, make sure it says that Mega 2560, and under Port, where have I lost this? Tools, Port. Okay. Start without your printer plugged in. Those are the ports that are that my system has currently in use. When you plug in your printer, after a driver is installed, you should see a new port show up. That's the port you want to select. I should also point out that programs like Cura, I have both IDE, the Arduino IDE, and Cura here on my taskbar. Programs like Cura will automatically grab hold of any printers that it detects out there, and your Arduino IDE will not be able to download code to it while Cura is running. So make sure you have Cura stopped before you actually try and compile and upload the code from the Arduino IDE to the printer.